Your Town Matters is funded by the Government of Canada through the Local Journalism Initiative and supported by Cactus Media, Canada's independent community television association.
I'm Vicki Hogarth, and welcome to Your Town Matters, on location in the village of McAdam. I'm joined today by the Mayor of McAdam, Ken Stannix. Thank you for being here today, Ken.
Oh, my pleasure, Vicki. Thank you very much.
Ken, recently you've made headlines in McAdam for citizens taking justice into their own hands. And you as mayor, as well as about 50 residents from the town, have even gone to Fredericton to their court dates to stand by them. Can you, in your own words, tell us what's going on and why you are supporting these people?
Basically, we have a couple of individuals who are alleged to have carried out some vigilante type justice. And with that comes a litany of issues that have occurred in the village concerning criminal activity, which is drug and drug crime related. So it's crime against property rather than crime against individuals. And that is part of the issue that we have to deal with here in the village. As far as going into Fredericton for myself and a couple of my council members to support Billy McGillicuddy when he was going in for his bail hearing, I just want to make it clear that we were not there to support him in vigilante justice. We do not support vigilante justice in any way, shape, or form. But on the other hand, we understand the frustrations of people in the village with criminal activity here. And so that's what we were trying to support. We wanted to go in and show the court system and government itself that we are tired of criminals, theft in our communities, not only in McAdam but around New Brunswick. And that was really the message we were trying to send. We certainly support the individuals. We understand the frustration from that perspective, as well as the frustration of the community. So really that's what we were there supporting.
Can you paint a picture for us about what kind of crimes have been on the rise in McAdam, and if that goes hand in hand with a decrease in police presence in the area?
Yes, well, that's a multifaceted response for that one. Really what happened was during the COVID period, a lot of the criminals were able to draw CERB, and so they didn't have to conduct theft. So they had the money to buy their drugs and do that kind of activity. So once the CERB and the other support programs started to die off, that's when there became a renewed surge in criminal activity. Of course, they need to steal product or goods to support their drug habits. And so they don't care as to what they steal, as long as it's portable, it has value, and they can make some money on it so that they can support their drug habit. The problem is, what they're stealing is livelihoods in the form of tools and equipment that people use to make the money that they use to live on. They break into cottages. Well, people work their entire lives to buy a cottage, outfit it with the equipment, boats, and that type of thing. So when these people come in and they steal a boat or a motor, or they steal tools out of a cottage, or those types of things, they're stealing a product or a good that people have spent their lives trying to attain so that they can enjoy their vacations and their off time. As well as when these thefts occur, it's also damaging to the individual's sense of security, because now they have been violated because their property has been broken into. I have an elderly woman living just on the outskirts of town. He drilled a hole in the bottom of her gas tank to take about $15 or $20 worth of gas. Well, that woman is on a fixed income. Now she had to go and pay $700, $800 to get a new gas tank put into her car, which she could ill afford to pay for. So not only has she suffered an economic loss, but she's also suffered a loss of that personal security, because now, are they watching me? Are they watching my house? What's the next thing they're going to come after on my property? So am I safe? So that's one aspect of it. So then we have the policing aspect. There's two different types of policing in New Brunswick. There's the provincial model and there's the municipal model. The provincial model is less expensive, but it's more of an on-call type policing. So if you have an issue, you call the police and they come. Very seldom do they actually show up in your community and do rounds and those types of activities. So for example, in McAdam, we pay about $270,000 a year for a provincial policing model for on-call. So what that does, we don't really have police here in the community, but we do have police on call. If we have a major crime, such as a homicide or a bank robbery or something like that, the RCMP then bring in outside help to conduct the investigation. And so that's all covered under the provincial model, so we don't have to pay extra money for them to come in and do that. We used to have the municipal model here. It's about twice as much money. And what really drove us away from the municipal model was, if you're paying about $500,000 a year and your budget is only $1.4 million, it really starts to cut into how you can run your community and the types of activities you can carry on. Plus, if you're on the municipal model, say you have that major criminal activity that takes place and you have to call in a major crime unit. Well, now you pay extra for that. So in McAdam, we had a situation like that several years ago. We were already paying a certain amount of money. I'm going to say $500,000. I think it was a little less than that. But then we had another bill for another $150,000 or $170,000 for this major crime unit to come in to conduct its business in the community. Well, it dang near bankrupted the village, and it took us years to pay that off. So we realized then we couldn't really stay with that model. We had to move back to a provincial model. So, for example, there are 3 communities, I believe, in New Brunswick that still follow the municipal model, and St. Andrews is one of those. So once you have a municipal model, you do have RCMP that are dedicated to your community. But recently we've discovered that there's even issues with that, because you have a sergeant that's in charge of, say, RSC 10 or the Regional Service Commission model in the province, and they are allowed to reallocate or request RCMP officers from either the provincial or the municipal model. And so oftentimes you'll see, and I don't want to speak on behalf of St. Andrews, of course, but you will see instances where they may not have any RCMP in their village. They've been seconded to another activity that's going on. So say there was a criminal activity taking place in St. Stephen. St. Stephen didn't have enough RCMP officers to respond. The sergeant then would request St. Andrews RCMP officers go there. Well, while they're there, there's nobody in St. Andrews. So it's that kind of it's not a biggie, but it could be if something were to happen in St. Andrews with no RCMP officers there.
A break-in sounds to me like something a police officer should be showing up for, but there have been instances of police not showing up to these types of things.
Yes, we've had several instances where people, so for one example, we had a person pass away. So the house was empty. Probably about 3 or 4 days later, it got broken into. So the family of the individual who passed away notified the RCMP. The RCMP said, well, we really can't respond to that. Put it through your insurance. And so that has happened a number of cases. And so that doesn't give you that sense of personal security that people crave, that their government should be supporting them with. So when that kind of occurs, we go back to them and we say, okay, why did nobody respond? So there's a number of issues here. First thing is your call goes to Moncton. And in Moncton, it's either the 911 or the other operator that's going to connect and take your call. Since the time when the 3 RCMP officers were killed in Moncton, they now have an individual in Moncton at the call center that when you call in, he assesses it's not the threat, but the requirement of response, I guess. So this guy takes a look at it and says, if it's a property crime, yeah, you really don't need to respond to that right now. If someone's being murdered, yes, you need to respond to that right now because it's a crime against the person rather than a crime against property and has more priority. So when we've talked to the RCMP officers here in RSC 10, sometimes they have never heard of the call that went into the call center to get RCMP response. And that frustrates the RCMP because when they walk into our community and they find out that there's something that maybe they could have come to that they never knew about, that upsets them and upsets us. And so there's a lot of people, so that's one aspect of it. So it starts there. And then it goes into the RCMP detachments. And then what they do is they look at it, is it a property crime or is it a crime against the person? Again, if it's a crime against property, they have their priorities that they have to look after. And so if there's something else going on, such as a domestic dispute or something like that, those take priority, and then they can't get over to look after the property against, or the crime against property issues. So that's part of the issue that goes on with policing. Then you have to look at it and say, okay, the province pays for a certain number of RCMP to be in RSC 10. But in that contract with the federal government, they don't have to replace police officers that are out on sick leave. They don't have to replace officers that are out on paternal or maternal leave. If there's people have to go on vacation. So really, although you have a set number of RCMP officers that are going to be looking after, say, for example, RSC 10, out of the 25 officers that might be listed, you might only have 10. And then you've got 8-hour shifts or 12-hour shifts, whatever that shift schedule is. So now very quickly you can see that the number of people that are available to go out and do actual policing becomes less and less and less. And so we found ourselves in that kind of a situation where there might only be 2 or 3 officers for the whole of RSC 10 that are available at any given moment. And so that's an issue, because when you call, there's really nobody there that can come to respond. The other aspect of that policing manpower usage is, for the most part, there's nobody available between midnight, say midnight, 2 o'clock in the morning, to 6 or 8 o'clock in the morning. So that period, there's no police available. Well, the criminals are not stupid. They realize when the RCMP are not around, nighttime is the best time to do their business anyway. So they feel pretty free to move around and do their business while the RCMP are sleeping. And the community is sleeping as well, for the most part. So now that's going to lead into something else that I'll bring up, and that's the village patrol that we set up. We realized we had a problem when we weren't getting police protection at night. The police officers are not here often enough to get the lay of the land, to know where the criminals live, or the suspected criminals live. So there's a knowledge gap there, along with a police presence gap. So we tried to overcome that by putting up a village patrol. The village patrol was to collect information only on people who were moving around in the community. So the information that we were looking for was really not invasive. It was, if you were driving around, okay, what color car drove by? What was the license plate number? Did you recognize the individual that was driving? Did you recognize individuals that were in the car? Did they stop at any of the suspected drug houses in the village? Were there things going in and out of the houses if you happen to be driving by? Because you can't do a stakeout on somebody's house. So we checked all those rules and regulations, and we talked to the RCMP Sergeant Peter Stubbs at the time about what we could and could not do. And so he told us what we were capable of doing. And then he helped us fill out a form or a sheet that the folks that went out on patrol could fill in the information that the RCMP then could use. So we did that for about 3 months. And after every night, we had about 25 people that worked on the village patrol. And we always went out in pairs of 2 so that we had self-protection, but you don't fall asleep, you're staying awake, you've got somebody to talk to, and 2 sets of eyes can pick up more than 1 set of eyes. So that worked out very well. We gathered a lot of good information for the RCMP, and we handed that in every morning to the office. And they then, I suspect, were building a spider chart as to who was connected to whom, who was doing what to whom, when they were in town, where they were when they were in town, what they were doing, and who was visiting some of these houses. And from that information, we were able to get some convictions. Not often did they lead to jail time, but we were able to get some convictions. The other things that we did to help protect the community was we set up cameras along the main drag so that you couldn't get in and out of the village pretty much without being seen. So that if we did have a crime occur, we had cameras that would see which vehicles were moving around at that time of night or who was walking the front street. And that helped quite a bit. We did get some convictions there, although they didn't last. The individuals that went to court didn't stay much in jail, much time. And so that's kind of the aspect of the policing. At RSC 10, we had a meeting with the senior RCMP folks in New Brunswick and for RSC 10. And so we set our priorities, which was St. Andrew, St. Stephen, Blacks Harbour, St. George, Harvey, McAdam, and all points in between. And we told them what our priority was for this year was drugs and drug-related crime. Number 2 was presence in our communities. And number 3 was traffic control. Traffic control really doesn't interest me too much. I don't have too much trouble with that in the village, but it's more the drug and drug-related crime and presence. So they took that all in. We have seen more presence in the community since then, but certainly since the alleged vigilanteism that occurred here, we've had much more presence in the community, which is a good thing to try and I don't know whether they're trying to make sure nothing happens to the bad guys or make sure nothing's going to happen to us, or just kind of keep the peace between the various factions within the community.
You had a public meeting. Were there any common threads raised by community members in terms of solutions? Because there's about 5 or 6 repeat offenders that the community is very aware of if you are here and living on the ground.
Yes, if when we look at it, even back when we were doing our village patrol, you could tell there were 6 or 8 guys in the community that were the main culprits that were involved with the drugs and involved with the thefts. So at our public meeting, basically the RCMP came to listen to the McAdamites and the folks from around the area and their concerns, what had happened, So more information gathering than solution oriented. So they got an earful from the folks here as to what we see the issues as. And basically it's what we've discussed. It's the lack of policing, the lack of jail time for the criminals once they're convicted. So those were the main items. I was surprised to see so many people from outside the community here, which really cemented our ideas that this is not just a McAdam thing. It's a phenomenon that's occurring across the province, and I suspect across the country with the drugs and drug-related crime. And so I guess the hope is that the government folks that were here, plus the RCMP seniors that were here, were able to hoist in the fact that we're frustrated and we want things to change. Now, how they're going to affect that change, I'm not quite sure how they're going to do that just yet. But there was some recommendations that had come out of the meetings in Moncton. And so I suspect some of those will come to the fore here as well. And it's just better use of RCMP policing, talk to the justice system. So Bill, when he was here, spoke about talking to the lead prosecutor in the province to see what they could do about making sentences, I won't say harsher, but stick more so that people can be taken off the street if they have criminal records as long as your arm. Let's put them away for a little while, give the community a little bit of a break from their activities. So hopefully we hope that that's what will happen, is that they will go back and look at those types of things to sort it out. But then, and as we talk about government and their reaction, it's a really complex issue, this policing. So really what we've focused on here is the policing aspect of it. We haven't tried to deal with the drugs, that problem and how that relates to crime. How do we break that cycle of the drug user and the criminal aspect of the thefts to support that habit? What we haven't discussed is we haven't gotten into the judicial system and how that case law has changed how courts work and what they're able to do and what the RCMP are able to do, such as, for example, they're no longer allowed to chase wheelers. They are not allowed to chase motorcycles. They have to have a court order in order to search a backpack. And so the criminals all know that. So they all drive around in four-wheelers, and they all drive around on bikes, and they all carry backpacks because they know by the time they go from one house to another with the backpack, the RCMP can't get a court order or a warrant to go and have a search of that backpack, even though they may suspect that there's something in that bag that's illegal. Or so you have to look at that aspect of it as well. Look at what case law has done, and then you have to look at what the politicians are doing. What kind of laws and policies have they brought down that have worked against the average citizen in his personal security? So it's a really complex issue, and when we talk about policing alone, we're only talking about a small facet of that large, complex discussion that's going to have to take place. And there's going to have to be some hard decisions made as to how we are going to address this issue at the lower level all the way through.
I think all eyes are definitely on McAdam now because it speaks to a much bigger issue. But I'd like to end today by talking about the border crossing at Vanceboro, Maine, that's scheduled to close for about 13 hours a day on the American side later this year. How will that affect McAdam?
So it affects us from a number of different ways, from the personal to the industrial side of it. So we have several people who live in McAdam that have cottages over on Spendick Lake on the American side. So if this policy was put into place, that this closure did take place, they would not be able to go over on a Friday night and come back on a Monday morning. So potentially it would limit the amount of time that they would have to cross the border. The people that I'm thinking of, they own a business, so their hours are pretty set. Late at night, they can't get away from the shop, and they can't come back until early morning because they've got to be there fairly early to open up. So if the hours of the closures cover those periods, then they lose their ability to enjoy their cottage on the other side. We also have a situation where we supply ambulance services, firefighting services to the other side in Vanceboro on occasion. So that would potentially be lost. We would also potentially lose business opportunities between the two communities. Families on both sides of the communities would potentially have to drive all the way around to St. Stephen and then up to come and visit a relative on either side of the border. So at the personal level, there's that aspect of it. From the trade perspective, which is important as well, St. John has just gone through an expansion at the port, going from 100,000 TEU, a TEU is a 20-foot container, to 300,000 to 325,000 TEU per year. The Canadian Pacific has purchased rail lines coming down from Montreal into Maine, so that they connect with NBM from Maine into St. John. And then you have CSX, which is another grade 1 or class 1 railway. They've just purchased a rail line up through the New England states to connect with St. John to conduct or carry these container traffic and the trade that's going to be coming through the port in Vanceboro. So CSX has invested about $100 million in that railway. CP has invested $90 million in their railway from Montreal down into Maine. And now you have NBM investing about $42 million, increasing their rail line from St. John to McAdam, building a rail yard, increasing the rail yard size in McAdam plus in St. John. There's also plans that were just announced that they're going to expand from the 300,000 TEU to 800,000 TEU per year in St. John over the next 2 to 3 years. That means there's going to be much more traffic, rail traffic going through McAdam, Vanceboro, and St. Croix. If they close that crossing, there's potential that they could bottleneck billions of dollars of goods every year. So if you damage that supply chain, then you adversely affect business on both sides of the border, which neither country wants that. We've already seen what those bottlenecks are doing in New York and in San Francisco. It's damaging, it's creating inflation, all kinds of things to the economies of both countries.
Thanks so much for joining me today, Ken. My guest today has been Mayor Ken Stannix of the Village of McAdam. I'm Vicki Hogarth. Thank you for watching Your Town Matters.